Halloween is a great time of year for Team Fortress 2. We get new maps, new cosmetics, new anxiety that Valve might forget about Halloween this year. It's great. It's not like they do that much for it anymore, but hey, I can make Spy a Crow this year. Who cares about anything else they add? But really, there are still things to get excited for, and I think for me that kind of boils down to the new maps they add. Some people say they're too hard to play, but I personally love being obliterated by every Halloween boss at the same time. Some Halloweens add really good maps to the mix, while others don't really. So as Halloween 2020 comes to a close, I kinda got thinking, which Halloween updates added the best maps? You can basically divide TF2's Halloween events into two categories, the years that Valve cared and the years that Valve let the community care for them. Every year after Carnival of Carnage almost exclusively featured community-created content, with Valve doing nothing but choosing what gets in and what doesn't. I'm going to be sticking to these community updates in this video because unlike Valve's official events which focused on a singular map and boss, So Gargoyle-centered updates added multiple maps with no real central theme to them, not to mention they're a lot closer to what we've come to expect nowadays. But before we can rank anything, we need to know what the heck we're actually ranking. So let's take a look at each Halloween update and what it brought to the table, starting with the earliest one and working our way up to now. 2015 was the 7th annual Halloween special, or the 1st annual Halloween special, where Valve did nothing but throw darts at the workshop to select a bunch of random maps. Cynicism aside, this update blessed the game with 4 new Halloween maps. Now yes, there are 5 maps on the screen right now, but this one here is a manpower map, and the fact that like only 10 people play that mode aside, it wasn't really part of the Halloween event. It just kinda happened to be added at the same time as everything else. The 4 relevant maps actually brought a pretty decent mix of stuff to the table. Gorge Event is the least creatively named map I've ever seen, but I guess it makes sense because it's basically just normal Gorge with skeletons. Nothing super interesting was changed, but it's aesthetically pleasing, and Gorge is an okay enough map to begin with, so it's honestly fine. Next up is Hellstone, which is a map that has the hazard of literally everything. You've got pumpkin bombs in 90% of the map's corners, ghosts and skeletons that spawn in approximately everywhere, the horseless headless horseman who spawns in at a specific point and kills everybody who's actually doing the objective, and also multiple monoculuses at the last checkpoint who spend their short, pathetic lives spamming you out with crit rockets and making existing peacefully impossible for a couple minutes. It's, not a very good map. It's pretty much what you get if you took a generic payload map, crammed every single Halloween asset into it, turned the spawn rate on everything up to maximum, and then slapped it on the workshop, leaving it to be somebody else's problem. If you couldn't tell, I absolutely despise this map. Moonshine Event is another one that I have mixed feelings on. It's a fairly open arena-style Koth map with a focus on spellbooks, which due to the openness of the map would theoretically end up working pretty well. The problem is that anytime somebody caps the point, Marasmus does a random spell, and one of the spells that he can do is teleporting everybody to hell, which resets the point, forcing it to be capped again for the round to continue. You can see where I'm going with this. I've been in hell for way too long. I've had some really fun games on Moonshine, but a lot of the times it is a bit cancer. Sunshine, though, unlike the other 3, is actually a really solid map. It's based on CP Sunshine, which is used in the competitive map rotation for a lot of formats. The difference between normal Sunshine and Event Sunshine is pretty much the same deal as Gorge. It's spooky and there are pumpkin bombs. Compared to the other 2015 maps, the lack of Halloween assets being spammed everywhere does go a long way into making this map more playable, but I still would rather play the normal Sunshine over Sunshine, so I don't know how much of a difference that really makes. But I guess considering that this is what ended up getting the normal Sunshine added to the game, I am willing to give it a pass. Also, why was Sunshine Event not the map that was called Moonshine? This has bothered me ever since these maps were added. Like, just rename Sunshine Event to Moonshine, and then call this one Haunted Lake or Cancer or something, and it would fix so many problems. Moving on to Scream Fortress 8 in 2016, there are only 3 maps to look at this time around. First off is Pit of Death, which takes advantage of the player destruction game mode introduced in the Invasion update. If you don't know what player destruction is, it's basically a mode where you kill people, pick up the things they drop, it's different for each map, and then take your collected thingies to a central location to deposit them into your team's total score. It's basically deathmatch with an added objective, which can be amazing if done well. Pit of Death actually handles this mode pretty well too. It's pretty big, so there's enough arena to fight everyone in without being too cramped, and it has some verticality to it, which makes it feel even bigger than it really is. Mid can be a bit campy depending on the team compositions, but there are enough alternative routes that any decently coordinated team could push through. The next map is Brimstone, which, oh, for the love of God. Brimstone is basically the exact same thing as Hellstone, except the spawn rates are slightly turned down in exchange for Marasmus dicking you over every 2 minutes. The layout is obviously a little bit different, but both Brimstone and Hellstone are just complete chaos for most of the round, so it's not like that really matters. I honestly didn't even know that these were different maps for a long time because my experience on both of them was exactly the same. I walk out of spawn, I exist for 30 seconds if I'm lucky, and then I get insta-gibbed by one of the 24,000 Halloween assets that exist at any given time. Finally, there's Maple Ridge Event, which is a fairly run-of-the-mill Koth map all things considered. I'm not the biggest fan of this one, since the lack of alternative routes along the outside makes the map a little bit choky, but it's pretty tame compared to the rest. The lowered area around the point is neat, I guess, but other than that, it's pretty generic, not much to say about it really. Halloween 2017 introduced us with amazing maps, such as,
Look, nothing.
yeah, it didn't actually add any maps for Scream Fortress 9. To be fair, it did happen like immediately after Jungle Inferno, and I'm guessing the potted plant and the janitor both got time off for their hard work. It still would have been cool for them to have picked like 1 or 2 maps, since it's not like they have to make them themselves, but considering how much we got for Jungle Inferno, it's not something I'm really that upset about. Halloween 2018 though, oh boy, Valve added not 1, not 2, but 5 entirely new maps, gee whiz. Now I am being a little bit sarcastic of course, because 5 isn't really that many in the grand scheme of things, but it is the highest amount of maps added for basically any update ever, so I guess it is notable. First out of the bunch is Monster Bash, which is another player destruction map, kinda like Pit of Death. But unlike Pit of Death, Monster Bash has a little bit of cancer going on. The layout is sorta based off of Nucleus, but instead of the middle island being the control point, it's the place where you deliver your buckets of body parts, which is not something I'm making up, that's literally what these things are. The gameplay on this map really depends on the lobby. Things are going to be pretty chaotic for most of the match since there's an abundance of spells everywhere, and it does suffer from a lot of the same problems as Moonshine in that department. But I have found that if you get the right lobby, this map does have a pretty good flow to it, despite the similarities between this one and Moonshine. But gameplay aside, the real reason why I like this map so much is the aesthetic. This is, to my knowledge, the only Halloween map with a Frankenstein or Mad Scientist theme. I made a joke earlier about collecting body parts and how weird that is, but it actually makes sense in the context of the map since you're depositing them into the monster you're trying to create. I might be a little bit biased about this one since I love the Mad Scientist aesthetic in general, but the castle on the outside combined with the laboratory gadgets on the inside really sets Monster Bash apart from the rest of the Halloween maps visually. Plus, some of the little touches add a lot too, like the spell pickups being potion bottles and these silhouettes existing in the skybox. So okay, this map looks nice, but only has okay-ish at best gameplay. What if there was a map that had both? Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Cursed Cove. I cannot gush enough about how I like this map. Cursed Cove is, in my opinion, the absolute peak of Halloween map design. It has a clear-cut theme of a cursed harbor, which on top of being something unique, actually looks really cool, and I'm sad there aren't more things designed around this. And not only is everything thematically consistent, it's pulled off super well. Everything, and I mean almost everything in the map, seems like it was carefully and deliberately designed, which is something you really don't see in a lot of other Halloween maps. Like seriously, the design of this map is so good that I'd even say it rivals the design of some of the official maps. The dock area is really well put together on its own, but the best looking spot on the map has got to be the underwater section, which is super atmospheric and even has these really cool coral reefs everywhere. Oh, and I haven't even mentioned the gameplay on this map yet. Cursed Cove is by far the best player destruction map in the game, like it's not even close. The map is super open and intricate, which is amazing for a killing-based game mode. The terrain is set up in such a way where there's only maybe 1 or 2 problematic sentry spots or excessive sniper sight lines. The only class that even feels slightly more oppressive than they should is Scout due to the layout of everything. This is without a doubt my favorite Halloween map in the game, and I could talk for like an hour about it, but I think you get the point by now. Oh right, Valve added other maps this year too. Cauldron is a pretty okay Koth map, I guess. The giant cauldron in the middle, which is of course the namesake of the map, looks pretty cool. It's one of the few Koth maps with a divider in the middle, which leads to some interesting plays since you can run around it or jump on top of it from the side areas. Other than that, it's a pretty standard Halloween map, all things considered. But alas, the law of equivalent exchange states that in order to get something good, you have to give something up. And in the case of the rest of the maps from this year, what we're giving up is our collective sanity. Slasher is not a map, but a social experiment, testing how long the human brain can survive in the Halloween asset dimension without collapsing into a singularity. Much like maps like Ioduct and Ghost Fort, Slasher spawns bosses that force both teams into a truce until they're defeated. But unlike those maps, Slasher spawns bosses constantly. Like seriously, you'll fight for 1 minute and then spend 3 minutes trying to kill a boss. It is so much worse than the other two. So then that begs a very important question to the developer. Why in God's name is the point timer 7 freaking minutes long? This doesn't mean that the game is gonna last 7 minutes. Oh no, that would be too fast according to Slasher. Depending on how unlucky you are with the boss spawns, as well as how long it takes your team to cap the point and to kill them, a single mashing Slasher can last up to 45 minutes. Nobody wants to play a Halloween map for that long. Oh my god. Well, and also there are ghosts and skeletons everywhere. Wow, my favorite. And all this is really too bad too, because if you strip away all the janky Halloween stuff, you end up with a really nice looking map. It has a pretty cool haunted campground theme, which like the others from this year is a unique idea. The trees and fallen leaves add some nice color to the map, and I especially like the totem pole and sign models they made custom for it. The last 2018 map... Here's the third and thankfully final map in the Stone trilogy. Valve apparently decided the liquefying people's brains with Brimstone and Stone wasn't enough, so they also added Gravestone to the games so that they can completely vaporize them instead. The only thing that's really different between Gravestone and the other two is that Gravestone teleports everybody to bumper cars at the end of the game instead of just declaring a winner. So on top of making the game needlessly longer, it also makes the payload portion of the game literally not matter at all. Great Blue, the payload actually does matter because you stop farther along the track if you win. Okay, I see you, but here's where the winners spawn, and here's where the losers spawn, and this is the full track. It really does not matter, and in fact, I think I'd rather be on the losing team most of the time because you have a really good angle to knock the winners off right at the beginning. Halloween 2019 took a different approach to adding maps. Instead of adding a bunch of different maps and hoping that people like one of them, Valve put a lot of time and care into selecting the 2 best maps that the community had to offer. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't say that with a straight face. For some reason, we only got 2 maps in 2019, and they're not really better than the other Halloween maps, for being honest. Laughter's design is pretty fun. It runs the same boxed-in control point setup that the other maps like Maple Ridge and Cauldron have, but it compensates this with some pretty good alternative routes you can take. The decent layout combined with the explosive balloons that spawn on the point actually makes defending this map fairly strategic. You can't just sit on the point forever, you either have to stay completely pushed up or completely fallen back. Laughter certainly isn't lacking in the design department either. Cursed Carnival isn't the most original thing ever, but most of this map being a boardwalk with various carnival attractions on it actually does give it a different feel than something like Carnival of Carnage would. Now, Precipice, on the other hand, oh boy, this map is basically Choke Point Simulator 2019. If you're defending in your team as a competent sniper, engineer, demo man, or in the likely scenario all 3, then congratulations, you've won the game. Probably my favorite comment that was posted on the workshop entry for Precipice was something along the lines of, when a sniper main discovers hammer, because honestly, that's about the most accurate description of this map you can make. The only thing I found kind of interesting with Precipice is this cliff area where it's super easy to air blast people off as Pyro. The only reasons I found that notable at all are because I main Pyro, and also because not many other maps have the payload track go right beside a cliff like this. And if you've played this map before, you'll know why that is. And finally, we end our spooky adventure in the current year of 2020. This year added a moderate 4 maps to the mix, which isn't too bad as far as Halloween updates go. Hassel Castle is based on Upward, and Bloodwater is based on Badwater Basin. And for the most part, they play pretty similarly to the originals too. Other than the obvious visual changes, the main differences are that Hassel Castle has this weird circular platform at the last point. Bloodwater replaces this concrete barrier with a fully built wall, which actually does make more of a difference than you'd think, and both of them incorporate some of the Halloween assets. Hassel Castle keeps it relatively tame, with the only new obstacles being skeletons and magic spellbooks. Bloodwater, on the other hand, oh no, Badwater didn't deserve this. Real talk though, it's not actually that bad. The Horsemen and Monoculus do get really annoying when they spawn, but luckily the guys who made this map were sensible in determining the rate that things spawn at. They only spawn when you cap a certain point, and I've played a couple games of Badwater, and I've only really seen them spawn once each. Other than that, though, about 95% of what you can say about Badwater and Upward still applies to these maps, which ends up making them surprisingly playable considering how much stuff they crammed in. Now, even though Upward and Badwater are really good maps, I don't necessarily think they completely steal the show this year. Both of the ones based on original designs have some pretty unique concepts included as well. Megalo has a control point in the middle which moves up and down based on a timer. Right before it moves, this held train thing goes across the point, killing anybody who was on it in the process. This seems pretty gimmicky, and I mean it kind of is, but the fact that the rest of the map is super open actually leaves this to be surprisingly playable. It's not perfect by any means. A good demo man can completely shut down the point if it's on the lower 2 levels, and a good sniper can almost completely shut down mid if he's decent at aiming. But the multi-tiered structure of mid actually does add some complexity to what would otherwise be a fairly small map, and there are plenty of alternative routes that you can take if one of them's being camped. Motor Grove is the other Koth map that was added this year, and it holds up pretty well too. I'm not the biggest fan of the layout since there are a lot of places that look down on the midpoint, which means capping can be super difficult depending on team compositions, but it does play a lot like Laughter, which is a map that I do like, so I'm kinda mixed. But the most interesting feature of Motor Grove is by far the 3v3 dueling system. Most times the point is capped, a bunch of portals to the underworld open up, pretty standard Halloween stuff. But what isn't standard Halloween stuff is that only 3 people from each team can go into the underworld, and that those 6 people have to duel it out. Whichever group manages to kill the other group first wins about 8 seconds of crits for their entire team, which means if you play your cards right, is basically a free recapture or complete defense of the point. I kinda wish the timer was longer than 30 seconds on the duel, since the size of the underworld arena makes running around and hiding somewhat viable strategies, but the mid-match dueling system is really cool, and I'd love to see it added to more maps in the future. Okay, I think that about covers everything there is to talk about with all the Halloween maps and the updates I'm looking at. Oh yeah, this video is about rating things. Okay, let's do that then. The worst Halloween update is pretty obviously 2017 and it's 0 total maps, and I'm putting it on here intentionally so people don't just think I forgot about it, but including 2017 honestly feels like cheating because there really wasn't an update at all. Out of all the Halloweens that actually added things to the game, I would have to give the title of worst update to 2015. None of the maps added that year aside from Sunshine were that good really. Moonshine and Hellstone are complete cancer to play on most of the time, and although Gorge is okay, it's based on an existing map, so I'm not sure how much credit I can really give it. Sunshine was the only map added this year that was actually good, although I still would rather play the normal Sunshine over Sunshine, so I don't really think it's that good of a map considering the circumstances. Slightly above 2015 would be 2019 and the 2 maps it added. While it did add less stuff than 2015, the maps that it added were a bit better. Laughter is easily the best map out of both of these years, and even though Precipice wasn't that great, I'd choose to play it over Hellstone every single time. Next above those is 2016, because although it didn't have that much good stuff, Pit of Death is a really fun map, and I also feel like the other 2 are fairly okay sometimes. Maybe I won't say that about Brimstone, but Maple Ridge is honestly fine. It's such an inoffensive map, I don't know how to even talk about Maple Ridge. Really, out of 2016, the only map that I actively don't want to play on is Brimstone, and I would even go as far to say that the other 2 are really good. Okay, the 4 updates I've talked about so far were pretty easy to rate, but the last 2, 2018 and 2020, were a little bit harder. If we're only talking about how fun or balanced the maps are, 2020 is the easy victor of this video. All 4 of the new maps that were added were really good. Okay, maybe only like 3.5 because Motor Grove is only okay, but you get the point. Badwater and Upward are easily 2 of the best maps in the game, and even with the extra chaos brought on by the added Halloween enemies, they're still just as fun to play as the originals in my opinion. Megalo and Motor Grove, regardless of what you personally think of their designs, have some pretty unique gimmicks that make the maps more dynamic. But I'm not just going to say that 2020 has the best maps for a couple reasons. First of all, as good as the maps this year are, they're pretty much riding off of the success of existing maps. Like, of course maps that are based on Upward and Badwater are going to be good. It's Upward and Badwater for God's sake. But the real thing that the 2020 maps are lacking is design. For anybody who isn't strictly a competitive player, maps are more than just geometry that you have to play around. Maps are intricate worlds that can tell their own stories and have their own themes. And I think 2018, regardless of how unplayable some of the maps were, really exemplifies this. When you're looking at some of the more visual components, Cursed Cove, Monster Bash, and Slasher are some of the most well-designed Halloween maps out there. And it's not like all of the maps suck either. I've already raved on and on about Cursed Cove, but the other maps like Cauldron and occasionally Monster Bash can be fun as well. So I'll let this video go 2 different ways, depending on what you value in a map personally. If you like maps having unique layouts, consistent themes, and good visual design, then 2018 is the clear winner. The fact that we got 3 uniquely themed maps that year is honestly incredible, and it makes me think that Valve actually took time to consider what they were adding. On the other hand, if you have a little bit more of a utilitarian view on maps and value good gameplay above all else, then I think you'd agree that 2020 is the winner of this list. Almost all the games that I played on the new maps have been fun, and it makes me wish that Halloween maps were playable for more than a month out of each year. So those are my ratings for Team Fortress 2's Halloween maps. Do you agree with my list? Maybe you disagree. Well, how could you? This list is perfect. But regardless, if you think that your opinion is strong enough to challenge the master at map rating, then leave your comment below for me to scoff haughtily at. But for real though, thank you guys for watching. I've been developing a couple more of these discussion videos to see how they go, so if you do like this, let me know, because your feedback actually does help in planning what I'm going to do. And leave comments, I promise I'm not going to scoff haughtily at them, that is a joke. Leave a comment, please. But yeah, until then, stay spooky, and have a good one.